Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Chua, and I'm presenting on the Malawi Legume-Based project, focusing on the evolution of our research methods. We've done this work together with our principal investigator in the project, who's Dr. Wes Muhango. So the project Best Bets really uh, is about supporting innovation, and we are supporting innovation with a focus on addressing the declining soil health in our complex farming systems in Malawi, which has really for a long time affected the agrarian communities in terms of crop productivity, our yields for maize, for example, as low as 1 ton per hectare, which is affecting food and nutrition insecurity in the country. A lot of under 5 children who are facing nutrition problems, or our livelihoods tend to be very unsustainable because we are an agrarian-based economy, and if agriculture is not moving as expected with the low productivity, our livelihoods are affected, particularly in rural areas. So we are focusing on in 3 districts, and in the districts up in the north we have Mzimba district, um, and then we have in the central region, which is Kasungu district. This part looks in the southern, but it's actually uh, geographically located as the same part of the central region in the country, but you see it is located very close to the southern region of the country. So the Best Bets has really run for several years. We're running over a decade, and during this period, we've been focusing on engaging farmers in soil health research. We started with the Best Bet 1 in 2006, and the Best Bet 2 in 2010, Best Bet 3 in 2015, and the Best Bet 4 in 2019. And recently, we'll be moving towards the Best Bet 5, which is starting this year, all supported by the McKnight Foundation. And during this period, one striking thing is that we have really focused on participatory principles in engaging farmers, but with modifications from one project to the other. And the one striking two things you can see in this graph that I've shown is that as we've moved from Best Bet 1 to Best Bet 5, the number of farmers has increased. So we started with few farmers and we're increasing farmers. Like in the previous Best Bet 5, we had around 600 farmers working in the project. And we've focused much on increasing the level of farmer participation, trying to move from a more researcher managed kind of experiments to more of farmer managed experiments. So those are the major changes that you see. I would like to particularly focus on the specific transitions that have taken place in our work, beginning with the Best Bet 1, where our main focus was on a systematic research that is highly rigorous by the standards of Fisher in the design of research. During this time, we were focusing on 2 districts, that's Kasunga and Mzimba, and we worked with a small number of farmers so that we can actually we looked for those farmers who are well exposed to research. They can do the rigorous research, for example, with agricultural community workers in Kasungu. And the design that we're using to engage them was the mother and baby trials, where we'd have a mother plot with 3 to 4 research uh, um, uh, 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 designed plots, and the innovations that are tested are coming from the researcher in those trials. And the farmers would take 1 or 2 from the mother trials to test them in their baby plots in their own fields. The researchers were doing the hard work, working with farmers, make sure that they visit each farmer and collect the data. So there was intensive interaction between the researchers and the farmers. And the focus at that time, in terms of data, was to focus on productivity for the crops and soils. We did soil profiling. We collected information on nutrition, like dietary diversity, and then we also collected information on the environment to see the context on how the environment was interacting with productivity. For example, rainfall data. In 20, in the best bet 2, best bet 2, we now try to bring a more quantitative approach, and this really is focusing on the modeling. And the focus of the modeling was to really model the productivity of legumes under different contexts. And this is the time when we add one district in Cheu. So remember, we're working with 3, so we came to 3 in the best bet 2. We increased a bit the number of farmers, and we continue with the mother and baby trials, which I explained earlier. But the increase of farmers meant that we also had to bring in exchange visits. So there was cross-district from farmers, our researchers in Kasungu, our farmer researchers in Zimbabwe would visit each other and share experience. And the focus, like I said, was really on adapting of legume crops to climate change, where we are modeling yield and soil data from farmers as well as climate data. And this now was really is different from the best bet 1 because we're just collecting data from farmers in the best bet 1. But in the best bet 2, we collect additional data, secondary data from the Department of Climate Change. That's the data focusing on climate change. And the other thing that we have added here is really to bring in the concept of participatory trial analysis. So the data that is collected from farmers, we bring in a feedback session where researchers and farmers discuss the data that they are collecting, particularly focusing on the variations, trying to explain why are they variation, why is one farmer getting more yield than the other, which is being considered as noise quantitatively in the data. In the best bet 3, we now try to focus on understanding these variations because the data which was being collected from the farmers was really something that one would consider as noise because there were a lot of differences. We have the same treatments, but with different results. Other farmers is doing very well and others not. So what was really these sources of variations? And that's when we introduced the multi-environmental trials, which tries to understand the performance of treatments in different environments and tested by farmer environment. And this led to the increase in the number of farmers. But the implication was that because the number of farmers have increased, the researchers are few, they cannot move in all the fields as they used to do in the best bet 1, where they work with few farmers. So the supervision from research actually reduces. And as such, there is training done to farmers to give farmers more capacity to collect data with minimal supervision from researchers. We also introduced a tool that tries to collect the sources of variations, and this tool actually focuses on also includes qualitative indicators. Like we learned that qualitatively from the feedback that is the variation were sometimes a result of gender, where how much time women have to take care of the experimental plots, but also was the issue of management as a result of distance. So some farmers had their plots very far from their houses, and which really affected the way they managed the plot. So we try to capture information on plot management. It's also the time where farmer research networks are introduced. This concept is introduced this time to allow not just remember in the best bet 1 and 2, we focus on testing researcher options or innovations, but this time we also bring in the window for indigenous knowledge or local knowledge. So farmers don't only test best double up legume only from the researchers, but also they start bringing issues like urine, which is more or less like a local knowledge. Their own thinking is brought into the experiment. And again, we build more capacity with the farmers to conduct systematic research and also trying to now build the networks of these researchers. Remember now the number of farmers has increased and we want really these farmers to share. And this sharing is not the cross district as was in the best bet 2, but the focus is mostly about within the districts, where we have so many researchers testing similar options in similar contexts and sharing information within the district. In the best bet 4, which has just ended, our focus now moves more from research framework, but we look up at scaling up, especially the context-specific soil health innovations. And this is when now we adopt the concept of option by context, OBC, and mostly implemented through the MED trials, whereby we learned that when the farmers were testing the legumes, the legumes effect on the soil fertility was really different. There were some soils that were not responsive at all, even if you put legumes, but they don't really help in terms of improving soils because the legumes themselves didn't perform as they are required to for them to improve the soils. And now the focus is really to understand what can be done to improve such non-responsive soils in that particular context. And then we also try to move from best bet 1 to best bet 3. The focus was really on 10 by 10 plots where farmers were testing on these small plots. But we try to understand and influence farmers to move from 10 by 10 plots to main fields. And what we try to work around is support farmers in moving maybe on an acre land, 1 acre land, 2 acres, in trying the options that they thought are working for them. And the other thing we do is introduce digitalized data collection tools, particularly the Kobo Collect, following the COVID-19 pandemic, which could not allow researchers to go frequently and meet farmers with the lockdowns. So the Kobo Collect is introduced, where farmers now are collecting data digitally, and there's interaction with the researchers at the university capturing the information. There is also introduction of qualitative methods for documenting the experiences that farmers have had with the different options. So there's capturing of videos and case studies, and some of the videos have been published on YouTube during this project. And we've also focusing on the economic evaluation. So previously, we know that some of the options that are promising to work in particular context, but we didn't understand the economics behind those options. So we've also engaged in trying to do economic evaluation of the options. Looking into the future, which is our new best bets 5, is really about now trying to shift from scaling from the main fields. We know you have moved from 10 by 10 to main fields, but now want to move at landscape level. But for us to do this, we need to introduce tools for collecting data at landscape. Remember, we have the tools that are focusing on the field and the 10 by 10 plot, but how do we capture information at landscape level? And we're also moving towards the systems approach, where we will not just be focusing on the parameters related to productivity or nutrition alone, but we want to see the interaction between these parameters, focusing on productivity, food, nutrition, and security, economics, looking at equality and the environment, how these different parameters interact. That's what we want to capture. And the networking within districts or between districts is not just going to be physical, but we also want to bring in ICT-based innovations like the social media, the blogs, the WhatsApp, the videos that farmers can take and share with each other. And particularly, finally, is really to link the best bet project, not to make it work in isolation, because now it's taking a systems approach. It has to work in synergies with other existing Makinite projects like the food systems, agroecology hub, and the botanicals. So basically, that's what the evolution of the best bets research methods have been, which I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much.